Joining us now on Sports Talk ATL, former Georgia Bulldogs quarterback Hutson Mason. Hutson Mason, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us this morning.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me.
So, huge game. But before we get into Georgia, Florida, and really this great stretch, we were just looking at the schedule. They got Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Florida all back-to-back. So a grueling stretch to end the season for the Bulldogs. I want to get your opinions on kind of the landscape of college football this year. You know, we go to the 12-team playoff. NIL and the transfer portal have clearly had their effects on the top teams being as dominant, I think, as we once saw. But as just fans, like I wake up every Saturday and I'm in heaven. Like it just seems like there is nonstop go from noon to 10 o'clock at night. And if you're a late fan, you might get a Boise State, Oregon to take you to 1 a.m.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the quality of the games is it's been taken to a whole nother level. I mean, look at 2 weeks ago, you know, like a Penn State USC game was a game that was like the fourth best game of the day. You know, and that was the day that I think we had Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Georgia. I think that was maybe that week or maybe it was the week before that. But I mean, you just look at it now, it's like from 12 o'clock all the way to 8 o'clock, you're getting just marquee matchups. And so I think from that standpoint, the conference realignment has been great. I mean, you know, to make this personal to Georgia, you know, for the past couple of years, season ticket holders have been, you know, left a little, felt a little slighted with the home schedule and just really the quality of games. And now in the blink of an eye, a season later, you look at Georgia's schedule and it's like the toughest in the SEC. So conference realignment, I think, has been great for fans. Coaches might have a different opinion on it, but I think for fans, it's been the best thing to happen for us.
Yeah, it's like crack in the 80s. This stuff, this drug, this new college football is a drug. Every single week, there's marquee matchups across, you know, Big Ten, SEC. The Big 12 is even exciting. I want to talk about mostly Florida, Georgia here, though. And I think, you know, in addition to the other. Do what?
He said it's Georgia, Florida.
We LSU fans here, boy. Oh my LSU fans, boy. All right, Georgia, Florida. I want to talk about this grueling stretch because you're coming off a bye this week. You got Florida, then you got Ole Miss. You got to go to Ole Miss, and then right off that you got Tennessee. But you do get Tennessee at home. You're Kirby Smart, and then you end the season with a cupcake, and then Georgia Tech. But this 3-week stretch is going to decide the season. And we know Florida isn't as good as they've been in years past, but this is a game that Kirby Smart knows well. You know it well. And if you're a Georgia fan, you've been a Georgia fan all your life, this is not a game to take lightly. This isn't that game that you can just kind of, we're thinking about Ole Miss. We're thinking about Tennessee in 2 weeks. This Florida game is important to Georgia's, the ultimate goal of getting to a national championship.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the reality of it is that because Georgia lost to Alabama already, and you look at maybe a team like Texas A&M who doesn't have to play Alabama this year, they're undefeated in conference, and so A&M is maybe a couple weeks away from locking up one of the spots in the SEC championship game, which would just leave, you know, one other team for second place. And if you look at it right now in the standings, there's a logjam of about 4 teams with 1 loss, including Georgia. And so you can't afford to slip up in a game like this if you're Georgia. The good news is that these type of games under Kirby Smart, like if I had to say there was maybe one difference between the Mark Richt era and the Kirby Smart era is, for the most part, and I'm knocking on wood here nice and loud, there hasn't been those slip-up games for whatever reason. And so coming off a bye week rivalry game, like I have full confidence that that Kirby's not letting those guys take these guys lightly. Florida looks better since they've gone to DJ Lagway, but he's a freshman quarterback, and at times he looks like that 5-star, but then at times he looks like that freshman. And so what's crazy is Georgia has not lost a regular season, or has not lost a game to anybody other than Alabama in 4 years. The last time they lost to somebody else other than Alabama was this game 4 years ago in 2020 against Florida. So you never really know. It's Halloween night. It's a rivalry game. Weird things can happen, or Halloween weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a guy in Kirby Smart that was like a former player for the Georgia Bulldogs and
he wants to win, I feel like, as much as the players
and
do.
Understands this Georgia-Florida rivalry, because I grew up a huge diehard Georgia fan, and Florida kicked our butts for my entire lifetime. I mean, it was just it was a tough sledding against Tim Tebow, Chris Leak, and those guys back in the late 2000s. And now this rivalry is flipped, but it never seems like Kirby Smart leaves that like that hunger leaves him for this game. Like he despises Florida and wants to almost embarrass them. And you see some of the clips come out from before this game, and you're like, oh, that's a little bit different from a head coach. But let's talk about these quarterbacks, because were a quarterback yourself. DJ Lagway obviously was very, very impressive against Kentucky. Maybe not as impressive against Tennessee, but he clearly gives Florida's offense a little more juice. And then you got Carson Beck, who I think most Georgia fans, non-Georgia fans that love the game had high expectations for him potentially being the number 1 overall pick. We like to say about Garrett Nussmeier, he's got a lot of Brett Favre in him. I think you're kind of seeing that with Carson Beck a lot. The decision-making, I think, has been the one area that he's lacked this year that really prevents him from being maybe that top quarterback in this class. What do you expect from him over this big stretch where decision-making is going to be such a key to getting these victories?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that Carson has played his 2 worst games in the 2 biggest games of the year, which when you're a quarterback who's expected to be a first-round draft pick, that's going to hurt your stock. Has he played awful this year? No. Has he played like the number 1 quarterback in the country? No. And so there's reasons for that. I think you have to look at, when you talk about an interception, you have to kind of break each interception down. Some of them have been he's staring guys down. Maybe he's a little overconfident in his arm strength. Maybe he thinks he can rip it into certain windows and get it in there, and he can't. Sometimes his receivers have broken his trust, and they're not at the right place at the right time at the right depth. The Texas game, I think it was the ball to Oscar Delp down there in the red zone. Ball's just a little bit off, right? And if that ball's right here, it's probably a touchdown. But instead of here, it's right here, and it leads to a tip pick. And so small things like that are happening this year that didn't happen last year. I think a game like this is really, really big for Georgia's season, but also for him personally and where he wants to go in the NFL draft. I remember a couple years ago, Georgia with Jake Fromm. I say a couple. I think they went and played at LSU and they got beat. And
I was there. Yep, I was there too.
they had a bye week. And Fromm didn't play really well. And I'm just using this as an example and as a compliment to Fromm. They had a bye week and they came back and they played Florida and they won, and Fromm played great. But during that bye week, everybody was kind of questioning Jake Fromm and could he get the job done? And he came out and he played extremely well. And I think that's what great quarterbacks do, is they have the ability to be mentally tough, block out the noise. And when everybody's kind of doubting them, they remind everybody why they're a top-notch quarterback. And I think it's important for Carson Beck to kind of come out and silence some of those questions about his performance in big games.
Yeah, Carson Beck, I'll put it bluntly, he just hasn't been good enough this year at all. But I will say circumstances do matter, like you said. His pass catchers are not helping him. I mean, drops, not making plays. Like, eventually you got to make a play. You got to help out your quarterback. Not everything's going to be perfect. Not everything's going to be wide open. And last year, it just felt like I was talking to some of my Georgia buddies that, like, last year, when in doubt, Carson Beck gets in trouble. He's trying to find Brock Bowers. It doesn't matter if he's covered. And I know Brock Bowers, generational talent, all that noise. He's the greatest that college football has ever seen. But he doesn't have that this year. He doesn't have, like, Oscar Delp was thought to be that guy. Like, we all thought Oscar Delp, from a recruiting standpoint, he's got all the stars. And then we see him in the game. And to me, obviously, I don't know them intimately. It just doesn't feel like Beck trusts him. So Beck does have to be better, but the pass catchers have to be better too. Like, eventually you're going to have to make, like, Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams is making plays. Kyron Lacy for LSU. Kyron Lacy makes plays that makes Garrett Nussmeier look better maybe than he actually is. Like, Ryan Williams has made Jalen Milroe look a lot better than he has at certain points. Like, Carson Beck does need some help. He can't do it alone. But on the flip side of things, DJ Lagway has, all the tangibles, all the, 5-star this, 5-star that. This Georgia defense, when the last time we saw him against Texas, that looked like a Kirby Smart coach defense that we were, prepared to see this season. What we saw against Clemson, and maybe maybe some of the injuries, maybe something, I don't know, Glenn Schumann, I don't know what's going on. Texas and Clemson. That's a Georgia defense that can lead this team to a national championship. And if I had to put my money on it, which I will be, DJ Lagway is going to be in hell on Saturday.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you're a freshman quarterback going up against Kirby Smart with a week off to prepare, the numbers are not in your favor. I think for Florida, this is a type of game, if you're Billy Napier, that could save your tenure at Florida. And I can't say that about some of the other teams that they're about to play the rest of the year. I mean, this is a game that if they were able to pull it off, Billy Napier would see a fourth season. There's no doubt in Gainesville. But for DJ Lagway, he's going to have to, Florida's going to have to, number one, win the turnover battle. And then number two, they're going to have to win the explosive play battle. And what I mean by that is you're just not going to drive the ball 10 plays, 75 yards consistently on Kirby Smart's defense. And so if you look at the Mississippi State game, the explosive plays, if you look at anybody that has beaten Georgia, it's always because, number one, they limit turnovers, but then they create explosives. So I think that's really what it comes down to is, can DJ Lagway find some of those chunk yardage plays? And does Georgia's secondary show up like they did? Do we get more of them versus Texas, or do we get more of the secondary versus Mississippi State? Because if it's the secondary versus Mississippi State, Florida's going to be in this game late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Listen, Billy Napier is a guy that we've been doing this show for several years. I have dumped on consistently, but you'd be lying if you said he doesn't have an opportunity down this stretch to save his season.
I mean, they should want to lose this game to get him out of there.
Lagway has been tremendous.
Yeah.
And he's kind of the saving grace for Billy Napier, because if they lose Napier, they lose Lagway, but they have a gauntlet. I mean, you talk about Georgia, then they play Texas, then they play LSU, then they play Ole Miss. I mean, that is the hardest 4-game stretch I've ever seen in my life. But I want to talk about Georgia's little 3-game stretch, because it's very difficult as well. You got Florida here, a huge rivalry game, Tennessee, and then Ole Miss. Which one of those games do you think kind of maybe worries you the most as a possible slip-up game for this team?
At the beginning of the year, or not even the beginning of the year, I think a month ago, I would have said Tennessee. But their offense just hasn't looked the same the second month of the season as it did the first. Ole Miss, I kind of doubt in big games under Lane Kiffin. In Florida right now, I've never really seen a freshman quarterback, no matter how talented he is, really carve up a Kirby Smart defense. So I would probably go back to Tennessee. I know they got a young quarterback, a first-year starter as well. But I think they're a little bit more of a well-rounded team. Their defense has been really more of the story this year than the offense. And he's got a little bit more of a mobile quarterback as well. So I'm not high on Tennessee beating Georgia as of right now, but that opinion could change over the next 3 weeks.
So I've got one last question for you. It's kind of off base, but as a independent third party, not in the Georgia-Florida fan bases, I went to LSU. I've been to Ben Hill. I've been to Sanford. I've been to Sanford as a fan of Georgia. I've been to Sanford as, not a fan, an LSU fan for a different game. Ben Hill, the Swamp is absolutely electric. Sanford's absolutely electric. I think there should be a home neutral in this rivalry, because Florida fans don't get to experience game day in Athens, and Georgia fans don't get to experience a game day in Gainesville. And they're two of the best places in the country, not just the SEC, in the country to experience a game day. Now, listen, a caveat. I get the Jacksonville thing. It's special, cocktail party, all that jazz. I understand that it's a big deal in between these two fan bases, but I feel like both fan bases are missing out on experiencing the other team's game day, because both of them are electric. I hate Florida more than anybody, but I can give them their roses. The Swamp is electric. What are your thoughts on that?
Man, Tom Petty at the beginning of the fourth quarters are pretty cool to see live, you know? That's probably the biggest compliment I'll give Florida.
Tom Petty.
Hey,
R.I.P.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm dogs all the way in this matchup, I think. And I'll answer my question for you. I don't think Georgia's going to have much of a problem with any three of these teams because a lot of the things you said, I don't think Ole Miss can protect the quarterback very well.
Tennessee's
think
at home too.
Nico's offense on the road, Tennessee's offense has just not been there. And like you said about Lagway and this freshman quarterback trying to beat Kirby Smart and this type of rivalry, it just seems like a far-fetched dream for Florida fans. But Hutson, I really appreciate you hopping on the show for the first time. Hopefully we can do it again in the future, talking maybe about a national championship for the Dogs.
Yeah, for sure. Would love to come back. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Go Dogs.